If it wasn't for your wellies, where would you be? You'd be in a hospital or infirmary, 'cause you would have a dose of the flu or even pleurisy if you didn't have your feet in your wellies. Oh, wellies, they're wonderful. Oh, wellies, they're swell, 'cause they keep out the water and they keep in the smell. And when you're sitting in a room...
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of In One's Kin. We are going to have some fun, have a little funny, and talk about an actor, musician, comedian, I don't know, everything, a welder. He's done all of the things. I hope everyone enjoys it. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. I know I had fun making it, and we'll have some more fun tonight. I am joined, as always, by Veet.
Hello, hello.
And Robert.
Hello.
I hope you guys are having a good week. How was your week, Robert?
My week has been exhausting in the geekiest way imaginable. The Shadows over Innistrad pre-release tournaments occurred for Magic the Gathering, and over here where I live, there are a lot of midnight releases for the first day. So it was Friday at midnight or Saturday morning, whichever you prefer, play in a Magic the Gathering tournament, go to sleep, go back to the store at noon, play another one, go home, go to sleep, wake up the next day again at noon, go play another tournament. I was exhausted all weekend, but I had a lot of fun. The new set is really cool. It's returning to a world that they've been on before called Innistrad. It's just a really neat place. It's a fun little fantasy world because for me, it's unique for the game setting. There's no elves, no goblins. Dragons are rare. It's much more kind of like B-movie gothic horror thing going on. It's unique in the setting of the game, so I really have a lot of fun with that place. It also came and debuted on the video game that's there, Duels of the Planeswalkers. That's a lot of fun too, and it's just been just a Magic the Gathering filled week. That just seems to be what I've done all the time. Cards, more cards. So tonight when we're done recording, I'm going to go buy the set when it releases at midnight at my local card shop, and then tomorrow I'm probably going to go do a booster draft when it comes out tomorrow. So
busy stuff. So did you win any boxes of boosters or any money or anything? How's it work? How'd it go?
Not this time around.
Womp womp.
I had the most hilariously bad luck you can imagine for this thing.
Your opponents had cards?
No, it wasn't even my opponents had cards. It was. I mean, if you know how Magic the Gathering works, there are lands that you need to draw to play spells, and there's Mana Flood where you do nothing but draw lands and you don't draw spells to play with the lands that you're drawing, or there's Mana Screw where you're drawing lots and lots of spells but not enough lands to actually play them. And this happened a little too often for me to be successful. And that was really sad the second and third tournaments that I played in, because I had an amazing deck in each of those tournaments from the cards that I got. And especially the second tournament. If I was casting my spells, I was winning. I had the most insane aggressive synergy. It was ridiculous. But there were a couple of games there where it was like, hey, you're going to draw nothing but land right now. You're going to draw land for the next 6 turns. And it's like, but I don't want lands. I want to draw anything. I want to draw anything right now to help me win. It's like, nope. You're going to draw a bunch of lands. Oh.
Feels bad, man.
Hey, how many people turn up at your local store for these launches and things?
The big store that I play at, the one that has the midnight launch that I attend, tends to have upwards of 60 people in attendance.
Nice.
More. Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy because it makes the first place card pool into something bizarre like 60 boosters and $50 of store credit. And it's like, yeah, so we win $110 in value. No, not actually more than that. A booster is $4 each. So, hundreds of dollars worth of value. It's insane. second place, third place. It goes all the way down to like eighth place at this store, depending on how many people are there. And then there's another store that I play at, which is where I go on Sunday, because the first one does both of their tournaments on Saturday, being midnight, and the day after. And the Sunday one, I don't like that place because the person who runs it is horribly unprofessional, and it's just kind of crap. For example, after 4 rounds of that tournament, the top 2 players were undefeated. So there would need to be a 5th round of the tournament for them to determine their outcome. Now, mind you, while they are playing their round to determine their outcome so that somebody gets first place, everybody else gets a 5th round to adjust their standings, right? So depending on who you play against and how well you do, you can, with a 3-2 match record, still place and get boosters. Well, what this guy does is he points out to the 2 people for the 5th round that they are the only ones undefeated, and they both agree to draw. And then he goes, "Oh, well, they're going to draw, so we don't actually need to play a 5th round." I'm like, that's not how standings works.
Dumb.
Really dumb. Yeah. So I was a little irked by that. But that's actually the kind of thing I expect from that store, which is why I tend to not put a lot of stock in that place, and I tend to not go there.
That sucks.
But they're the only show on Sunday.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that was my weekend, and that's pretty much what I've done. And classes started, so, I'm teaching Photoshop again.
Yay. So lots of Kirby's.
Jigglypuffs. I am so offended. I am so offended at you. I know that they're both little, like, pasty pig things, but no.
You just got trolled. So Veet, how was your week?
Yes, my week. Let's see. I finished a stint of 4 12-hour night shifts in a row, so I haven't done that in a long time, and that knocked the stuffing out of me. Followed by a tooth extraction yesterday.
Ooh.
So yes, that was an interesting experience, but I've only got myself to blame, so I'm not looking for any pity. But that's that. Highlights were this week were the I have to say, Blizzard's short animated pieces on Overwatch. The 2 they just released, one on Winston and one on what's the last one? The Widowmaker, are just brilliant. It's like, I know nothing about these characters. These characters have been, arrived out of the blue. I have spent maybe an hour in the beta playing. I don't see myself playing the game very much because I'm not really a first-player shooter type person, but I just love these characters.
Yep. Blizzard season 1 on Netflix by next summer. Come on. I
tell you, absolutely. There's no reason why they couldn't do an animated short run of these things, telling the stories of all these diverse characters. It'd be brilliant. Yeah, and they have that magic where you just watch these 5-7 minute animated shorts and you just love them. Yeah, I mean that is no joke. The entire purpose of Overwatch is to be a media franchise that also has a game. Yep. I hope so. They have that was one of the first things they mentioned about it. Is like, yeah, all these characters have stories and back, lore and stuff, and some of them know each other, and you're going to find out about that outside of the game. And when it was first announced, it was coming off the heels of Destiny, and they're like, please don't make me just read a codex on my app. This is garbage. But they're actually handling it very well. Bungie, take a note. This is how you handle meta, media and get people to engage in your game. It's good. Yep, absolutely. Yep. And they'll get people buying into it who have absolutely no interest in the game. Well, I mean, I've been showing the shorts to my family, and they're like, "Man, I would watch that show." I'm like, "Well, you kind of already are." I mean, there is no story to be had within the game proper. All plot is going to be distributed through TV shows, comic books, whatever. And I think that's great because, as I've mentioned, a lot of people, I don't actually have to play Overwatch to enjoy Overwatch. Like, I
I've embraced that so hard that I have, the Tracer statue and a bunch of other things. The game's not even out. I've never even been in the beta. I haven't really watched any of the streams of the beta. I'm absolutely obsessed with these characters. I love their designs. I don't think I'll ever get tired of Tracer, which, since you brought up Overwatch, I just want to point out, if anyone from Blizzard is listening, which I doubt, but rethink your stance on the collector's edition and the Tracer pre-release, because apparently if you were very excited like I was and you bought your crazy what was it, over $100 collector's edition that comes with a statue and the art book and the soundtrack and a bunch of other things, that's what I did. I was just like, I'm going in, so I bought it. And now they are saying that Tracer is going to be in Heroes of the Storm a month before her release, but only people who bought the digital version will get Tracer, which is kind of lame because the only way to pre-order it at the time was the physical version, and then afterwards they've changed their mind.
This is one of those situations where any other company would go, you get your pre-order bonus code for the other game with your down payment. So like if you paid like $5 or something, they'd be like, here's your code.
See, I'm actually even more lenient than that. I just want them to give me like a gold refund or something in Heroes of the Storm. Just when I tie in my Overwatch Origins Edition account or whatever, just let me have the character for free. Because I get the character for free with the collector's edition I have now, but I will have to wait 5 weeks before I can actually get my Tracer for free that way. Ouch. Which means that's 5 weeks of playing Heroes of the Storm and having everybody else with the shiny new toy killing me with it.
They should. Okay, so what they should do is let people try her leading up to the release, and then if you don't have the collector's edition, you just lose that character. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
That sounds worse.
Yeah, I'm just staring at a situation right now where I feel like I'm getting unfairly hosed, and like I'm not even mad about it. Like I'm not mad at Blizzard or anything, and like I'll still really be happy with Blizzard. I'm just really looking at this, possible 5 weeks in Heroes where I'm just going to be miserable every time I log in because it's going to be like someone else has Tracer.
I'll have Tracer.
I don't
by some accident.
Yeah. And I'm just going to be like, man, this is lame. And I feel like the solution is easy. Just let me buy her with gold the week after she's available from the pre-order people.
Yeah.
And then refund me.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a hard pull. I don't think it's hard. Yeah. Just,
Just quickly, first thoughts, Rogue One trailer.
Oh, God.
I was going to mention that, Veet. Why didn't you take that away from me?
Okay. All right. How's your week, James?
My week was fine. I was going to talk about Rogue One. No, seriously. My week was good. So that Rogue One trailer.
Yes.
Oh, God.
So I have a question. Is this story taking place before the fall of the Empire?
This takes place between episodes 3 and 4.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, you know when the rebel leader says many Bothans died to bring us this information.
We get to see what a Bothan is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what
we watch them die.
Yeah, this movie is that story.
Just Bothan army suffering and dying.
It's not about the Bothans. It's just that's a byproduct of the results of the plot. It's just going to be a story about getting the plans for the original Death Star. It's kind of a Star Wars heist movie, and it's the first of the vignette series. Yes. So like every year there's going to be a new Star Wars film. So this year it's Rogue One, and then next year it's going to be Episode 8, and then the year after that it's going to be a young Han Solo movie, and then the year after that it'll be Episode 9, and then the year after that it'll be a movie about some guy called Boba Fett who I guess is popular, and then they're going to start telling stories, just random stories in the Star Wars universe.
And then the year after that everyone's going to be broke because they're getting double whammied by Disney and Marvel and Star Wars every year. Multiple movies. All the money going to the same company.
Yeah, well, apparently I can afford it.
I watched Rogue One 50 times. I mortgaged my house. Oh, man. So, yeah, that was cool. It looked awesome. It was what I always said George Lucas should have done, but he refused to do, which was to tell stories in your universe. You have a universe. Are you insane? Exactly. Like, tell stories. That's what I care about. I care about the Star Wars universe. So now we finally get that, and I am happy.
Oh, it looks great. Little darker, a little sinister. It looks like a perfect heist movie. I am so ready for it.
Yep. And outside of that, Robert is ruining my life. He finally convinced me to play Heroes of the Storm. So you suck, Robert? But apparently I don't suck at Heroes of the Storm. I'm doing pretty okay. So that's a plus.
That's a bonus.
No one has told me to kill myself with cancer yet.
He's not bad. He's pretty good. Actually, he doesn't die.
Which apparently is a good thing. The game even told me so. It called me untouchable.
At 20 kills, you get Hero of the Storm call out.
All right, so let's get to our main topic.
All right, let's do this.
So, Veet.
We're going to talk about sandwiches?
Yeah.
What?
Huh? Beef.
So what are we talking about, Veet? What are we learning about? Educate us.
So this week is a individual person who I truly admire and adore. He gets described as actor and musician, but for me, he is truly a comedian. And this is a gentleman by the name of Billy Connolly. Now, I'll give everybody a bit of a forewarning before I go into this. It's very hard to talk about Billy Connolly and some of his routines and what he does on stage without contracting some of the Billy Connolly language. So I'm going to make every effort to substitute the F-bomb with the words shit and bloody. Okay?
Oh, man, what about...
very hard.
What about Bassa?
Bassa?
Yeah, he talked about how he invented his own words to replace curse words.
Yes. So that's what I will try and do, because it's very hard to not talk about Billy and use certain words. So I had to really rack my brains this week and think about when did I first actually come across him? Because of his early routine being very sweary, he was not a everyday television persona. So, and there was obviously lots of controversy at the time when he first appeared and he came on stage and he performed in the language that he does.
Which is
but he
Scottish English.
Scottish English, very... I've got a bit of a story to tell about the language and whether it's a created character or whether it's truly him.
Ooh.
But I'll get to that in a little bit. So he would appear occasionally on late night television, on Parkinson, which was a very popular British late night host. And they were great buddies. Yes. And he would appear on his show routinely, and they were the best of buddies. So they really hit it off. And occasionally, if he toured, he would appear on other people's late night shows. But he wasn't a everyday television persona, particularly in the 70s and 80s. Somewhere along the line, I started listening to a comedy hour on a local community radio program. Because it was community radio, they got away without having to censor. Well, maybe they did censor and they bleeped it all out. I can't remember. This is the trouble I'm having. But this is where I caught glimpses of Billy Connolly and his stage stand-up routine. So much so that, and I was a late teenager at this point, 16, 17, 18. I took myself off to the library and to the VHS store to see what they had on Billy Connolly. Well, his tapes were there, and occasionally there was a cassette tape of his stand-up routine or a videotape. So I got these. Now, Billy Connolly's my first true sweary comedian. And having led the sheltered, want to say, life that I had, this just blew my mind that somebody could get up on stage and just F this and F this, F that, and talk about sex so openly. And, you know, if he dealt with hecklers wonderfully, in my opinion.
Like pouring
He
water
just
on
told
them.
them to F off. He just told them to F off. He just didn't care. He just told them, you know, you don't like it, leave. Just leave me alone. You know, you're here for my show. You're here for my show, or not at all. Just leave. F off. He didn't try to outsmart them, outjoke them. He just told them as it is. So I was just blown away by this extreme extrovert on stage. I remember even taking cassette tape recordings of VHS tapes so I could listen to in the car when I eventually got my own car, so I could listen to his routines in the car. I never played these at home when my parents or my sisters were home. This is just strictly, you know, if I had a day off at uni or something, that would be playing in the background. But I certainly wouldn't have these on when my family were home.
Can't imagine why.
Well, you know, yeah. Having to explain that, oh boy. And again, I left home, moved to Brisbane. I actually lived 12 months in Brisbane without a television. And this is the time, this is 91. So there wasn't even internet at that point. Well, not internet that the general masses could use. A year later, I bit the bullet, bought a television, I bought a VHS player, and I, again, went to the video store, and recordings that I really enjoyed were the Big Yin, Billy and Albert, and an audience with Billy Connolly. And it was just so different than anything I'd had seen before. And I didn't know that people could get up on stage and swear and curse and just tell dirty jokes and that sort of thing. So he was a real eye-opener. And there's something about his charisma, there's something about his personality that you really admire and you're just drawn to. And I was just one of those people. So we then get to about the mid-90s. And he's by the mid-90s, he's already done nearly 20 years of stand-up on stage. He's had bit parts on British television. He now wants to take the next big step. So he and his family move to LA, and he sets up base in LA. Oddly enough, he won the green card lottery, and that's how he ends up being able to set up base and live and work in Los Angeles.
Oh.
Tries to, as a lot of comedians, and I'm not sure why, maybe it's just after 20 years of stand-up, you just want something different. But a lot of comedians then seek an acting career, and that's what he tries to achieve. Gets a leading role. You guys are probably too young to remember a sitcom by the name of Head of the Class. Moderately popular.
I'm aware of it.
You're aware of it.
Sounds familiar.
It's moderately popular. It was not big, huge, but it was sort of like not early afternoon, sort of your before news type sitcom that you would watch, something maybe on cable TV, on something like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. Not Cartoon Network, but you understand what I mean. It's sort of that sort of light. It's sitcom light type program. So anyway, he takes over the lead role from that, and it's his first big break in the US. all reviews are great. Everybody really likes his performance, but the producers basically canned the show within 2 years. So he didn't really stand a chance to sort of get his name out there. There was a spin-off. There was enough positivity from this performance. He played the teacher who basically taught this class, inspired these students to do great and wonderful things. It did receive enough positivity from his performance that he got a spin-off, but it only lasted 6 months. So he played the same character. It was same character, but they basically canned it after 6 months. And it sort of leads to probably a discussion we'll have a bit later about why Billy never hit it as big as he did in all English-speaking parts of the world except for North America. Like, this guy is a legend. He's a comic legend in UK and Ireland, in Australia and New Zealand. For some reason, he never really clicked in the US. So he had that bit of a start, sort of spun his wheels a bit, going nowhere really. He starts producing what would be best described as travel documentaries. And by travel documentaries is he would tour a certain country, and his first one was Scotland. So he's basically gone back home and doing a tour of Scotland. But instead of just being a 1 hour or an hour and a half of him on stage, he creates, I think it's a 6-part series, 6 1-hour episodes of where he's actually traveling around Scotland, seeing the sights, meeting the people, interjected with his performance that night. So if he was like heading to, Glasgow for that day, that they would show sights and sounds and him meeting people in Glasgow, and then they'd interject maybe 5-6 minutes of that night's stage performance of him in Glasgow. And then the next day or whenever, he'd move on to the next area, see the sights. And this was, again, hugely popular in the UK and Australia and Ireland and so forth. And it led to a series of these. He did Australia, he did New Zealand, he did one in the USA, but much later on. But these were hugely popular because by this stage, yes, they were. There was less hubbub about the language used on stage. Yes, it was bleeped if it was being shown on like sort of regular primetime television. But and this is part of the reason why I do admire the guy so much, is that he truly engaged with the people that he traveled around and met. It was not just seeing the sights. For Billy, it was meeting the people and engaging with the people. And because he's well known, these people were super keen to, appear on the show and try and up Billy on a joke or something of the sort. But he's not somebody you'd ever describe as pretentious. It's never about, this is my show and I'm showing you the sights. It was like, come with me on this journey and we'll meet the people and have a drink at the pub and run around naked around Stonehenge. It's just wonderful. So there was those travel documentaries, and again, it led on. The ones he did in Australia and New Zealand were lovely too, because he actually engaged with the indigenous peoples from those countries, with the Maori in New Zealand and the Aborigines in Australia. And again, it wasn't a look at these people, these dark-skinned people doing their funny dances and whatever. He actually engaged. He would actually, strip down and wear the traditional costumes or engage in the dance and eat the food. And he would learn the instruments that they had. And it was a real genuine interest he had in doing these shows. funny moments like it basically started a running gag. In the very first one he did, like I said, he ran around naked around Stonehenge, which led to basically him running around or appearing naked at some point at somewhere in each of the countries that he did a travel documentary on.
As one does.
It's only logical.
Right. So, and that was the thing. He just didn't give a shit. That goes to Billy. Billy as a person. He's
a joy of life kind of person.
Yes.
Enjoy it while you're here.
Enjoy it, absolutely. He can't stand pretentiousness, can't stand politicians. In fact, his favored, his most quoted quote regarding politics and politicians is, "Don't vote, it only encourages the bastards."
Yep.
Right? He just sort of didn't care for people who got up and pretended to care what you had to say. He couldn't stand people, politicians, or even celebrities for that matter, who for them it was look at me, watch me sort of thing. He was not into that. He was not into conformity either. You can tell by the clothes he wears. He just never wore the same thing twice, and two, he just wore what the hell he wanted to wear. Jackets with daisies on them, all sorts of weird hats, striped trouser, striped pajama pants, banana boots, or anything. He just didn't care or at least he gave the impression, and I think he just didn't care. What he wore and he didn't care what other people thought of him.
And it's interesting. I can totally respect his point of view on politicians, as you described it. Also, as James is somewhat aware, I'm very much of the opinion I can't stand it when politicians will run around saying I care about you and stuff like this. Like how? I mean, just given America for an example. I mean, United States of America, there's like 300 something odd million of us. If I drop dead tomorrow, no one in politics is going to know that I even existed. So when they stand there and be like, I care about you, I'm like, no, you don't. Don't give me that.
And you'll see it turns up again and again in these routines. He will occasionally address politics and politicians, but only just to say, I don't care about you, and here I'm going to make fun of you for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Which is wonderful.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
It's a very American idea that everyone's supposed to be involved in politics, but I mean, these systems go on. They're going to still do their thing. There will always be somebody who wants power.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I am a person who is very endeared towards people who just want to have a good time while they're here. I don't mean like self-destructive, and to be good to the people around them, because at the end of the day, that's all you have. Like, and I honestly got that. It was funny. Like, I don't know why, but watching him for some reason reminded me a lot of my dad. I guess it's just because he was a very, simple, not dumb, but he didn't expect a lot out of life. He just wanted to do what he does and have a good time. And if anybody didn't like it, they went on with their business. And just watching him, I was like, man, this dude reminds me of my dad a lot, because my dad started as a welder, and it reminded me, like, not to be, to get too deep or sappy, but my dad always liked to tell like funny stories of stuff from his life, and that's what I noticed about Billy Connolly. It, like, you always categorize comedians. They always get categorized. You have improv, you have observational, all this stuff.
Right.
But it's funny categorizing him as a comedian, because I don't see him being like a stand-up comedian, because he wasn't using observational humor. He was just using observation, and it was funny. Yeah. Like he wasn't observing things. Most of his comedy skits was him just telling about things that happened to him.
Right. Right. And it's what he is. He's a storyteller. And
Yeah.
for some reason, he's probably one of these people who goes through life and lots of stuff happens to him. And he just loves retelling and recounting. And I don't doubt for a second that he embellishes them
Oh,
because
yeah.
he has that ability. Sure. But it's just enjoyable to listen to. You're right. Because once you go back and you listen to a lot of Billy Connolly stuff, you go, how many things could happen to one person?
Well, if they walk outside a lot.
Well, that's true. But I think he's just that person that he just generates attention and things happen to him and that sort of thing. There's a story he tells. He was in Ireland somewhere, comes out backstage, is met by a fan, and the fan says to him, I just loved your show, thought it was brilliant. You interested coming with me? I'm going to go do an armed robbery. The guy was trying to get Billy to come with him and engage in an armed robbery to basically show him, the sort of life that he led, and maybe get a story told as well, which I guess he succeeded. What person goes outside and somebody comes up to them and says, I'm about to pull an armed robbery. You care to join me? Can only happen to Billy.
Well, like you said, if he's going to tell the story, I mean, the guy probably is thinking to himself, this would just be a thing. Maybe he's drunk. Who knows? Just go for it,
Right, exactly. So in the middle of these travel documentaries, it was about 1996. He's doing his tour of Australia. He's stand-up tour of Australia, and the word is out that he's also shooting the travel scenes for a similar thing. And it was always called the World Tour of Billy Connolly's World Tour of X. So this was going to be Billy Connolly's World Tour of Australia. My wife's uncle and cousin buy me a ticket, so the three of us go and we go see Billy Connolly live. So this is the one and only time I've seen Billy, and I just had a blast. I had tears coming out of my eyes. It was just not only just the stories and being involved and how he engaged the audience, but I was literally there about 6 rows from the front from one of my heroes, basically. It's one of my greatest experiences ever. And funny enough, I was thinking about back then, and I'm going to try and retell a story. And yes, this is going to fail because it's one of those you had to be there. And I'm certainly not Billy Connolly, but it's the one and only story that stuck with me after all these years. And it goes like this. He was in Scotland, Glasgow at the time. Big game of soccer was on at the time. Obviously, his team was not playing in Glasgow; they were playing elsewhere. So the thing to do was to go down to the local pubs, grab a beer, and engage in watching the more than just watching on television, but engaging in a crowd at the pub, cheering with your fellow supporters. On his way to the pub, he comes across a mate of his he hasn't seen for a while. And he describes this guy as being eccentric, actually a little loopy, and very leftist, sort of tinfoil hat leftist. And they're doing their best to try and get a good spot at the pub. But no matter where they go or what pub or what tavern they try, and they can't get a good vantage point to see the television. So his mate turns to him and says, look, screw it. How about we just go back to my place and watch the game there? And Billy sort of agrees because, they're not going to see the game any other way. So they go back to his place, and this place is an absolute pigsty. There is just crap everywhere, clothes and food and boxes and everywhere else. They literally have to grab armfuls of garbage off the sofa so they can actually got somewhere to sit and watch the game on television. So they watch the game, get to halftime, and his buddy says, I'm really hungry, but I've got no food in here except eggs. You interested in a fried egg? And Billy says, sure, I'll go fried egg. So his buddy goes off to the kitchen, hears a lot of clashing and banging, and God knows what's happening in there. He can only imagine what the state of the kitchen's like. A couple minutes later, his mate comes out holding a hot frying pan with the hot, oily egg in the frying pan and the spatula in the other hand. And he gestures to Billy to take the egg. And so his buddy scoops up the egg in a spatula and literally holds out the egg on the spatula. It's dripping hot oil, dripping egg. And Billy's looking at him and looking back and looking around. And he says to him, can I get a plate? And his buddy goes, oh, don't be so bloody bourgeois.
Wow.
And that just cracked me up. It cracked me up. I'm going, you have to be middle class to expect a plate when you get a fried egg from your buddy. It was just the absurdity of the story. Like I said, it probably falls short. I'm not Billy Connolly, so I'm not telling it like him. But the absurdity of that moment just really stuck with me. So yeah, that concept was just, for me, it was just wonderful.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
It is bizarre. It was just, but that's what a lot of these stories are, and that you laugh at is just these bizarre situations again and again that he finds himself in, All right, so let's move back to the US. In amongst all this, he's desperately trying to break into the US movie scene. But all he manages to do, and I'm sure you guys can speak to this, all he manages to do is get bit parts in movies and bit parts in TV series. He's appeared in, Boondock Saints and Lemony Snicket's, as well as he's appeared on...
He was in Pocahontas.
Right. And that's what happened with him. He basically got typecast into two distinct roles. Either as a typical Scottish voiceover. So he appeared in Pocahontas. He appeared in Open Season. He appeared in...
he was in The Hobbit.
Yeah, but that's I'm just talking about his voiceovers. He was in Brave. He played the king, the father in Brave, which is probably the biggest single voiceover role he got. But basically, that was one. He got the stereotypical Scottish, heavily accented Scottish voice role. The second role...
He's got the voice for it, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
man.
No doubt.
When I was listening to him in the the 1970 stuff, I was like, "What is he saying?"
Yeah.
I was like, "What?
Yeah.
What's happening?"
Now, right. So that was part of the reason why he struggled to get started in the States about the 70s and 80s, because a lot of Americans struggled to understand what he was even saying. The difference when you're living in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, UK is that you're getting television from all around all the English-speaking countries. So you're watching English television, you're watching Scottish television, you're watching American television, Canadian television. So you develop a ear for accents, whereas American television is 99% American television, American produced.
Well, America... which is funny you bring this up. So America's approach to media is completely different than the approach to media from outside of America. It was very structured. Like, it's what's called the neutral accent, which I, for the most part, have. America really likes to do the neutral accent. And before... the improvements to recording devices and stuff, you got that really voice like this, like that came out of America, because for the most part, people hated the way they sounded. Like, you've even mentioned it when you first started. You're like, it's so weird hearing myself. Well, that unique American approach, that neutral accent, was developed so that when people heard themselves, it wasn't so off-putting which nobody, if you're outside of America, you don't care. You're like, whatever, just speak, say what you gotta say.
Well,
Yeah.
there's also some practical reasons for that as well. I mean, when you consider the very large geography that encompasses the United States of America and how, I mean, I can think of right now all of the different accents that are just within this one country. I mean, people up in the northeastern regions, I mean, they call it the Jersey accent, and that's no joke. Those people sound nothing like the people who are in Alabama, who sound nothing like the people who are in Texas, who sound nothing like the people in Colorado. I mean, Washington State is where I am is basically the state of the neutral accent. Like we're just like, hey, all these people on TV sound like us. But then, if I take a trip down to Texas, no one on TV sounds like the people I'm sitting around.
Yep. And I grew up in the southern part of America, so I know what it's like, because I had family members from like Muscle Shoals and like, from the mountains from up in Kentucky and stuff. And so I would, you'd run into people talking like this. Hey, man, we're fixing to go out to get us some fish. Y'all want to go? And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. You're fixing to go get us some fish. Y'all want to go? Okay. All right. I think I got it.
Yeah, so a neutral accent's actually really useful for us just because it's something that everyone can understand.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, I still don't understand how I have a neutral accent at all. It's some kind of miracle.
Happens. I'm one of those people, though. I tend to pick up things like I'll start to develop a southern drawl and other things when I'm around people for like a week. I just start to adapt. Just as an aside, it's funny that you mention the neutral accent because it's so incorporated into all of our media that you don't consider when it shouldn't occur. And there was a really funny moment in a Spider-Man comic where Peter Parker is talking to a character named Ezekiel, and Ezekiel goes, well, I know that you're from Queens. You've got that Jersey accent. And Spider-Man's like, I have a what?
Yeah.
It
was a joke in Anchorman. It was like, I had to do all these things and work on my neutral accent.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I can understand why it would be hard for Billy Connolly to make it, especially in the 70s and stuff, because he was more folk hero than comedian, I guess, would be his roots.
Yeah, that's true. And he was speaking a lot of Scottish and Glasgow slang. So you used words like Wayne, which meant little child. So if you're not familiar with that, you're sort of caught out.
But that's why I say, the United States and Britain and the other English-speaking countries of the Crown, we are two peoples divided by a common language.
Yes.
Yeah,
here
seriously.
We are. So let's see, where was I? So
talking about him trying to break into movies in LA and getting bit parts,
right? And basically, if you go to his biography pages on IMDb or Wikipedia, you'll see it. He's been in loads and loads of work, but the majority, 95% of all this is just small cameo roles, small bit parts, and so he plays the stereotypical Scottish voice in voiceover, and in live action, he plays the quirky, eccentric professor, the eccentric bum, the eccentric oddity. That's what he played again and again, which for someone who knows what he's capable of, after a while became very disappointing, really.
Little drawl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see somebody being wasted.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because, because they would use Billy Connolly to promote these American movies outside of the US because they knew he was such a big draw. So he'd be used in the all the promotional stuff. So you go along, see the movie, and he's literally there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes at best, and that's that. And the role he's played, you've seen already in 5 previous movies. In 1997, and it's really disappointing because in 1997 he plays a major lead in a British production called Mrs. Brown. It's a movie. Stars Judi Dench playing Queen Elizabeth I, and he is Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown is basically, it's towards the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign. Husband's been a husband who the man she's been married to for quite some time has now been passed away for 2 years, and she's in a rut. She's depressed, not really getting on with her queenly responsibilities, that sort of thing. And so they engage one of his servants, a Mr. Brown, to engage with her, to try and get her out of this rut. It's a drama. It is a lovely, wonderful movie, period piece. Typical. Judi Dench does a fabulous job, and Billy Connolly does a great job as, yes, he plays a Scotsman. Mr. Brown was a Scotsman, but he's just playing this sort of terse, strict man, and they develop a very close relationship, and it really shows so well. So he does this fabulous role, and you find it with a lot of actors who go into movies. I always come back to Robin Williams. They do they have their career in stand-up. They want to go into movies. The first handful of movies are comic roles, and then they eventually have this breakthrough serious role. For Robin Williams, it was Dead Poets Society, and I genuinely thought this was it for Billy Connolly, because he showed his true ability as a serious actor. Went nowhere.
Shame.
Feels bad, man.
It was, people acknowledged it. He received many accolades in the UK and Australia and New Zealand, many accolades. And I honestly thought that the US market would see this and start getting him for their movies to play more serious roles. Now, in the last couple, 2 or 3 movies he's been in, Quartet, particularly, he does play a much more serious role. But like I said, if you just go through his many appearances in movies and in TV, it is just that typical, stereotypical part, which was disappointing.
Yeah, even in The Lord of the Rings, he is playing a very strong dwarf.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And
I mean, he's there because, Peter Jackson is, from New Zealand. He's like, I want Billy Connolly in my film. I mean,
Right.
that's what's happening. But then they typecast him.
Yeah, exactly. But so a bit of a question on the side, and I don't know if guys know, and the question popped into my head: why are dwarves played as Scottish? Time and time again, the Lord of the Rings, or in Blizzard games, so forth.
Because
I'd really
they drink.
like to know.
It's the cultural tie of alcohol.
Possibly
Of being boisterous.
Yeah.
If you think
Loud,
who is a boisterous, loud
drinkers.
person who is bullheaded and will tell you what he thinks at a moment's notice, Scotsman.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of fantasy does that thing where they take a singular trait of a group of people and then go, and now there's an entire species that fulfills this quota.
True.
And what's weird though is you can't. There's nothing else that. There's no other fantasy race that does that. It's not like elves or French or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just like Hobbit. Well, I guess hobbits you could say are British, but they don't speak.
They're
True.
very
Yeah.
British.
But they don't.
Right.
They
True.
don't speak with British accents though.
But hobbits don't appear in multiple movies and different in video games and so forth. But you can guarantee.
Yeah, but it's exactly what we were talking about before, where it's like Tolkien's fantasy has just corrupted everything to the point where people just don't see it another way. I mean, It's like if you do a non-Scottish dwarf, I guarantee you someone's going to load up and come get you.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh yeah,
I would love to see where that began. That seems like something that someone needs to find out why it is, because they're the only race I can think of where they have an actual parallel to a real culture. I can't think of anything else. It's not like orcs are based off something, or when they're portrayed. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's like Star Wars and the Empire. The Empire is always British.
Yeah. Well, and Rogue One's going to continue the long tradition of British actors in a Star Wars film. But actually, I was going to kind of point out also that it's interesting that when you look at fantasy races, you have the Scottish dwarf, which is, as you said, something based in reality, and then all of the other races, and I tend to point this out as lazy writing. Some people have avoided it, like Straczynski and others. BioWare, with their games, kind of avoids it, but also falls into the same trap, where the races just personify like a certain sort of creed or mantra. Like, this is the proud warrior race. This is the meditative calm race. This is the political race. This is the barter race that, feeds off capitalism. It's like all of the races are just, stand-ins for some sort of ideology as opposed to being a group of people.
It's weird. True. I guess sitting here thinking, the only other example I can think of is in World of Warcraft. The goblins, for some reason, are from Jersey. They're very shallow.
Yes, they are from Brooklyn.
Yeah. Time is money, friend.
You're forgetting also, trolls are Jamaican.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Blizzard.
But only in Blizzard's world, really.
And only Blizzard could get away with Jamaican trolls, all right?
Yep, until they took out the joke about, killing 2 dwarfs in the morning, killing 2 dwarfs at night. Marijuana jokes, folks.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. No, I love in Warcraft 3, though, where it's like, what do you mean what kind of exit this is? It's the troll exit. Bah, Jamaican me crazy.
Oh, man. So, yeah, Billy Connolly, I hate typecasting so much. It always makes me so mad because it's like you can see it like looks down at the script and just in brackets it just says Scotsman.
Yeah. So in 2005, I think Billy comes to terms with the fact that all he's ever going to get are these bit parts. So he basically packs up and leaves and goes back home to Scotland, takes his family back home to Scotland. Because if he's only ever going to get bit parts, then he can certainly fly in and fly out for that. So basically packs in the towel with his dream of a acting career. Next, I want to talk about, and I've tied the two together, Biographies and his wife, Pamela Stephenson. And I've done this for a reason. And the reason is, prior to 2001, there were a handful of biographies written about Billy Connolly. I've read one, and I think I may have read a second. I couldn't quite recall. But they are all very similar, all very linear, all very much telling the same story that Billy's already told on stage. And like I said, they're all very, very linear. It starts off at point A, goes to point B, goes to point C. One or two of them might have a sort of a story, a retelling of a story by a friend of a friend that gives maybe a little bit of insight. But once you read the first one, they were pretty much all the same. Now, so let me tell you about his wife, Pamela Stephenson. Pamela Stephenson was New Zealand born, moved to Australia at an early age. So the family moved to Australia at an early age. She then became a comedic actor herself in early 20s, I should say, playing sort of more sketch comedy on television. Moderate success, some notoriety. Generally, in Australia, particularly at that time, so we're talking about 80s. If you want to take the next big step, you're more likely to have some more success in the UK and Ireland than you are going straight to the US. So that's what she does. She goes to the UK and she gets herself on what became quite a successful news comedy show, which was called Not the 9 O'Clock News. Again, very sketch comedy, a very, I'm trying to think of a modern day relevant, sort of similar. You know, what's the news part on Saturday Night Live, where you have, you know, they tell this sort of fictitious news where they're sending up current day events and current day politicians. It's along those lines, as well as lots of sketch pieces. And again, here she achieves even more notoriety, becomes a bit more famous, and through that meets Billy Connolly. It's all covered again and again in the multiple biographies that exist of him. What's interesting is, and her nerd fame, you guys may know this, her nerd fame is that she played Lex Luthor's blonde bimbo thing in the first Superman, the Christopher Reeve Superman.
Oh, okay.
You know the ditzy, good-looking girlfriend of Lex Luthor, who's played by
Hackman.
Hackman.
Yeah,
That's
Hackman.
it. Gene Hackman. So she plays. That's it. That's her like one and only claim to fame, because when they moved to the US, she thought she'd have a go as well, and that's basically all she achieved, and she didn't want to play that stereotype. So she said, screw it, and she went to university and studied something that she's always wanted to study, and she became a psychologist.
Nice.
Has written numerous books on psychology, very well studied, were very well regarded. She actually ran a practice for about 15 years while she was in the US. And at the late 1990s, she decided to write what basically became the quintessential biography on Billy Connolly. And there was 2 books, one released in 2001 and one released in 2003. Funnily enough, I got my copy of the book. My family and I were in the US at the time. Billy Connolly was completely off my radar at the time. My mother-in-law came to stay with us. She came for a month or so to visit. She had bought herself a book at the bookstore just before she got on the plane, and it was this biography. Arrived in the US, and as she's unpacking, she grabs the book and she goes, "Oh, you might enjoy this," having absolutely no idea of my fandom for Billy Connolly. And I loved it. And it is you think about it. What better person is there to write a biography on somebody, A, your wife, and 2, a trained psychologist?
Oh, man.
I'm sure it's not biased.
Well, she's honest, and I honestly believe it because Billy would want it that way. If she's going to say, "I want to write a biography on you," Billy would say, "Just go ahead and write it."
And now he's got another story to tell. He's like, "Let me tell you about the biography."
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, and he does refer to his wife and her, trying to psychoanalyze him at different times and so forth, and him sort of being engaged in the conversation and then realizing he's being psychoanalyzed, and then in a fit of rage just turns around and says, "F off," that sort of thing. These 2 books are just brilliant because not only do they tell the story, they really delve into the person that Billy became and why he became the person that he did. So obviously these are it. If you want to know about Billy Connolly, these are the 2 books to read. And made the biggest reveal of his life, because Billy grew up, throughout all his life up to this point, he tells that he grew up in the slums in Glasgow, that his mother abandoned him. He was brought up by 2 very tough, begrudging aunts. He worked on the shipyards in in Scotland, in Glasgow. So he tells all this, but there's one thing he doesn't tell until these books are released, and that is that he was sexually and physically abused by his father. And it comes out in this book because they've gone to visit his dad, who's on his deathbed. They've done with the visit. They get back in the car, and Billy just sits there. And he doesn't drive. He doesn't do anything. He's just sitting there, and she tries to engage him and work out what's wrong. And this is the first time that he's actually owned up to it. And like, she's just blown away by this big reveal. I mean, he was an alcoholic too, through his early life, and dealt with that. But this just sort of like caught everybody off guard. And it speaks a lot to comedians in general. When you look into the lives of comedians, they all seem to have some dark demon about them. A lot of them have issues that they're dealing with, whether it's some substance abuse or something that happened in their life. They all have something in their past that they struggle to deal with in their personal life, but for some reason it creates a person that has no problem getting up on stage in front of thousands of people and telling jokes and making people laugh and looking larger than life.
Yeah.
And yet their own personal life is, dark and quite tragic.
The saying is behind every comedian is a sad, broken person. Like that. Yeah. That's the saying. And for the most part, it's true. I remember somehow I ended up with a book by Louis Anderson when I was a kid. So I was in like the 4th grade, and I'm sitting here reading Goodbye Jumbo, Hello Cruel World, and it basically turned me off Biographies because I was like, this is the most depressing thing I've ever read in my life. Because
how did you get your hands on that in 4th grade?
I don't know. Why did I have a book about a biography about who's that serial killer? She killed her parents with an axe. Why did I have that? Why did I have letters to home, a sniper's tale from Vietnam? Why did I have these books?
Okay.
I don't know.
But it's real things that actually happened.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I don't know. I had this weird fascination with like reading stuff that I probably had no business reading. But yeah, I can attest to comedians having really, really sad lives.
Oh yeah. At some point in the future, I will talk about Robin Williams because he's the second of the comics that have really impacted my life. And there's another sad sack of stories as well. And when I've been thinking through this week, I've been going, don't talk about Robin Williams, because it's hard to talk about one and not draw parallels. So that's the reason why I've been trying to stay well clear of Robin Williams, because I do want to talk about him on a separate show. So yeah, that was the big reveal. We thought we knew what his dark past was, but we actually didn't. And yeah, like I said, if you really want the quintessential life story of Robin Williams, it's these two, and they're called Billy and Brave Mouth. And they're not huge. They're not huge tomes. They're actually quite easy, light reading. But it's very interesting to have it been written by Billy's wife, and who's also a psychologist. So, if I'm being totally honest, Billy for me in the last 5 to 10 years has really fallen off the radar. I can't really explain why. Maybe because I think maybe in part with the internet being so prolific, there's so much to watch, there's so much to see that there's more to do than just, you sort of get distracted and you watch a little bit of this and you watch a little bit of that, and somebody says, watch this funny clip here or watch that funny clip over there. But, I guess you don't have the time to go, oh, I want to devour everything Billy. So, yes, he's sort of fallen off the radar for me. About about 3 years ago, I watched a clip or watch an episode of him doing his world tour of the USA travel documentary series. And as I'm watching this, I'm going, hang on here. This is not the same Billy. He's slowed down. His facial expressions don't really change that much. He's not as exuberant. I mean, when he's on stage, he's just flapping about and running here and running there. And he's just really, even when he's talking, standing with somebody side by side and they're talking, he's still very, animated. But he just seems to have just slowed right down. And I said to my wife, I think he's got Parkinson's. And she looked at him, and now my wife's father had developed Parkinson's in the mid-90s. So we sort of lived that experience, and he eventually died a couple of years after that, after being diagnosed. So we had that experience, and she looked at him, and she sort of agreed with me. He just wasn't the same Billy. Sure enough, about 6 months later, it's revealed that he is basically stepping back from a lot of his work because he's been diagnosed with prostate cancer and Parkinson's disease. And I'm just floored. I'm going, really? This guy, of all people, to get Parkinson's disease? So from what I've researched, they treated the prostate cancer. That's not an issue at the time. There's a clip on YouTube from Pamela who talks about this. She goes, the beauty about the Parkinson's disease is that it is very slow evolving Parkinson's. And this is about 2012 when it's sort of announced. But he still intends to work. The beauty of it, his wife was saying, was that all this attention on his health got them to address his hearing problem. So, like you said, he was initially in his career, he was a musician, a folk artist, on stage a lot. So he'd gradually over time had lost hearing, but because of now his health being a priority, they've discovered that yes, he does have a hearing problem, and that wife is thankful that now his hearing is so much better. He can actually hear these hecklers calling off stage and the people he's addressing, and she can finally hear her speak when he speaks to her. But I sort of said to myself, I knew it, but I said, bloody hell, really, of all people. And as I was doing the research for this show, and he's managed to still tour. Like he appeared in The Hobbit in 2014. He was in another movie, What We Did on a Holiday, in 2014. But he's been really backing off the amount of work. In doing research for the show, I've actually found out that he's actually still touring. He's actually touring in the UK as we speak.
Nice.
And I read some, I go, oh boy, I wonder what that's like. Because there's a couple clips of him receiving the National TV Awards for, it's sort of like Hall of Fame in the Television Hall of Fame in the UK. And he's received that award this year. And he gets up on stage and he is slowed down. I think probably in the last 6 months, he's really deteriorated. That wit is still there, the humor is still there, but he just has no expression on his face, and it just takes that longer to come out. But he is still touring. So I did a bit more looking into, and I'm going, what reviews is he receiving? And a lot of the audience reviews are saying it's like sitting around the sofa in your living room, listening to your great uncle telling you a bunch of stories from the past, and they just love it. It's sort of like a way of saying farewell. And he's not dead yet, for crying out loud.
Don't bury him yet, Veet.
No, don't bury him yet. But there a lot. These tours are quickly selling out because they know pretty much it may be the last time they'll get to see anything from him. And God knows if he comes anywhere. I don't know if he's I don't know if he's traveling at all. He might be just sort of sticking to the UK now. But I can tell you now, if he comes anywhere near Australia, New Zealand, I'll be getting tickets to that show.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not often with celebrities that there is a winding down, you know? Like a lot of times you just wake up.
Right.
It's like this week, it's like wake up, Merle Haggard, he's gone. It's like, what?
Yep. Or Robin Williams committed suicide, or how many have died from drug overdoses and so forth, you know?
Yeah, like for me, for my comedians growing up, it's like John Belushi's gone.
Yep.
What?
Oh man,
you know,
Blues Brothers is still the best thing.
But you're right. It's very rare. This is actually quite rare that you actually get to see a comedian of such notoriety wind down his career as opposed to going out in a bang. I'm sort of hoping, and I'm sure they will, release a DVD at the very least, even if he doesn't travel outside the UK from now on. I'm looking forward to getting that DVD when it comes out. So I'm going to wrap up here. I wanted to talk about Billy Connolly. When we devised this show and we wanted to come up with our own topics and our own things that influenced, that impacted us, the third thing I wrote down was Billy Connolly. And in preparing for the show, I sat and said, so why Billy? Why did he have such an impact on me? He didn't influence me. It's not like he inspired me to become a comedian or get up on stage or learn to play the banjo or, do stand-up. It was more of his personality impacted on me. When I look back, particularly when I first came across him in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, he was everything I wasn't. He was loud. He was an extrovert. He had no fear in standing up on stage in front of people.
He was Scottish.
He had no fear. Yes, yeah, true.
Everything.
Everything. Absolutely. I look back and I was the absolute complete opposite. I was petrified of what people thought of me. It's been ages agonizing over a comment somebody made about me, about what do they really mean by that. And Billy didn't give a rat's about it, If he didn't care. If he was somebody if he liked and admired you and you said something to it, he would consider it. If you were an absolute stranger or a troll or an ass, he'd just tell you to F off. He just didn't care. But funnily enough, as I've gotten older, now in my 46th year of life, I'm finding I'm developing some of these traits that I admire in Billy. I actually care less of what people think about me now.
Yeah, that tends to happen a lot. As you get older, you're just like...
Right, it does.
Who am I living for?
Yeah, exactly. You agonize less. You worry less. You actually give a shit. You don't give a shit about what people think about you. Or you still do, if I'm being honest, I still do, but nowhere near as much as I used to. One thing I've developed, particularly in the last 5-6 years, maybe a little bit longer, is I've developed the love of storytelling. So 2 years prior, so 2014, 2015, I had a teaching job. I was a healthcare tutor. So I'd have a class of students, and probably Robert can sort of relate to this. The teaching was one thing. You get up, you teach A, B, and C. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to be aware of. But the beauty in my situation was I have 25 years experience as a registered nurse. So not only can I tell you about what it's like to care for an elderly person, but I've got a ton of stories that I can tell you about looking after an elderly person. Some of them are funny, some of them are sad and, mournful. But I found when I would then teach A, B, and C and then tell my story so that I could relate practical to theory, I realized that I had the class's attention. That was the time, above all else, I had their focus and attention the most, is when I was telling these anecdotal stories of my experience of being a nurse and trying to relate it back to the theory that I was teaching. And there is no bigger buzz, even with my audience of 20 students, there's no bigger buzz than A, knowing that you got their full attention, and 2, getting that laugh out of them or getting that little weep out of them. It's I can see why a lot of people who get up on stage thrive and love what they do. So in my own little way of it, sort of experienced that. I still like to tell my stories. If I feel that somebody is prepared to give me more than 2 minutes of attention, I'll tell them a story or two, and it's usually nursing related. So it's usually I'm telling these stories to younger nurses. Let me tell you, in my day, those sorts of things. But I try and not talk down to them. I'm trying to relate, be relevant, I should say. So that's why this guy, to me, is such a legend. Yeah. I have really enjoyed this last week, getting back on YouTube and watching a whole bunch of new clips and old clips and reminding myself and thinking I need to sit down with my daughter and we'll watch some of these clips. So yeah, that's me and Billy Connolly.
Best friends forever.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah. Yeah. What I wouldn't do to meet the guy in person, that'd be something special, wouldn't it? Anyway.
Meet him, share a pint.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't drink. So his wife, Pamela Stevenson, basically said that the only way she would maintain any further relationship with him was if he stopped drinking. So he basically became a teetotaler from that point on, and he was struggling with alcoholism at that point. And I think he was actually vegetarian as well. I might be wrong there, but I certainly know that he stopped drinking well back in the late 80s, I think.
I hope he fixed the vegetarianism. That stuff's terrible.
Yeah, I know.
That's probably where he got Parkinson's from.
Yeah, maybe not.
All that meat deficiency.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys, where have you encountered, as my US friends, how and when have you encountered Billy Connolly?
Boondock Saints.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it?
Just all that stuff you mentioned where he was typecast. I actually do remember that TV show, though. The Head of the Class.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, because bear in mind, your exposure to him just naturally is going to be a lot larger than ours is. We have to seek him out. Otherwise, I mean, he just never really hit here. And like you were mentioning, you were wondering why. I think a lot of it is that maybe he was kind of overlapping with the absurdly popular at the time Eddie Murphy, who was also really, really vulgar. And that was like his whole shtick was watch me string together like a bunch of expletives and no one does this. And he also had the benefit of, for us anyway, being understandable more easily.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. It was just stacked against him. It's a lot of timing. Like if he had happened today, he'd be fine.
Yeah, that's like Hugh Laurie. People are like, yeah, that's the dude from House. It's like, you do know he had a very prolific stand-up comedy career, or skit comedy career, right? You do know that, right? Like,
nobody knows that.
Nobody
guy.
knows about that. No. Him and
that guy is so vulgar.
Yep.
Yeah, he's an accomplished musician, vocalist. Yeah, but It's funny you say Eddie Murphy. See, I always found Eddie Murphy vulgar, but I never found Billy Connolly vulgar.
It's presentation. Like
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy was vulgarity for the sake of vulgarity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the
I
difference between someone doing a stand-up routine and someone just talking. Just talking.
I did have a thought. It just left me. It did just leave me.
It's gone now.
Oh, well.
Goodbye, thought.
I'm God.
Bye-bye. Out of here.
So,
It's okay.
So Veet's
That's
done.
all right.
I think so.
I'm done. I'm done.
He's run out of
I've
words.
He's
I've
like,
run out
okay.
of words. I really have.
A for Oddfuck.
Yeah.
We start over. Oh, man.
B for Batman.
S for Superman.
C for Catwoman. D for Doom.
All right, guys. All right.
All right, so it looks like we have reached the end of our journey with Mr. Connolly. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/InOne'sKen, INONESKEN, no spaces, no apostrophe. We're also on SoundCloud and iTunes, which the only way you would know this is if you visited our Facebook, SoundCloud, or iTunes. I don't know why I say these things. If you are on iTunes and you're listening to us, please give us a 5-star rating, mainly because it helps us get exposure. So it has nothing to do with quality. It just gives us exposure. We have a Gmail, but I think it gets checked sometimes. I don't know. I hope nothing important.
I check it.
Oh, yay.
No,
It gets
I
checked.
check it. Yeah, it gets
It
checked.
is checked.
It is checked.
So, yeah. I hope you
Yeah,
have
we'd
fun.
love, guys. We'd love feedback. Your, what were your thoughts and opinions on Billy Connolly or anything we've discussed previously? We'd love to
Topic
hear from you.
suggestions.
Yeah,
also.
absolutely. Love to hear from you.
Words and stuff. I'm running out
Yeah.
of words, too.
Well, next week, for anyone who wants to start looking into it, and oh boy, will you ever be happy that you did, we're going to do the DC animated universe, which is the
nice.
Batman. I know, right? The Batman series from the 90s that almost got in trouble for using too much black on TV, which then steamrolls into Superman from the animated series, which then becomes not Justice League, Batman Beyond, and then Justice League, and then Justice League Unlimited, and it's amazing. It is the best thing ever.
I just want to
is
prepare our
great.
listeners, since we are talking about the DC animated universe. Robert doesn't realize it, but he is unleashed an unfathomable rage because I am going to talk about Young Justice and it being canceled, and
Fair enough.
if I was a totalitarian dictator, there would be beheadings because
But
that show.
But that show, I mean, you can bring it up. That show has nothing to do with the DCAU.
Yeah, but you said, wait, how? How is it not?
How's it not?
It's Young Justice League.
No. The series from Batman through the end of Justice League Unlimited is a fully contained story.
Okay.
Anything
All right,
beyond
so-
that is not part of the same canon.
Okay,
Okay.
so
But you can
all
bring
right.
it up.
So
No, that's
you
fine.
need to clarify. I didn't know you
That's
meant
all right.
like you need to specify like cartoons whose
That's what I
executive
meant.
producer is
He
Spielberg.
just has.
Yeah,
But
but
no, that's cool. And all that stuff's on Netflix. So yep, it'll be easy
Yeah.
to watch and get through some of that stuff. No, it's some of my most favorite stuff too. So I look forward to next
Oh,
week.
it's incredible. So yeah, do yourself a favor, look that up. And I'm also going to use it as a platform to continue arguing about Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. So yeah,
There you go.
I'm going to
There
be
you go.
angry about Young Justice. So get wrecked.
here we go.
DC animated is better than Marvel animated. I said
Is
it,
it ever?
Oh, yes.
It
and
totally is.
I'm a Marvel
Yeah.
fanboy. So please, if I'm saying it, it means something. See you guys
But
next
anyways,
week.
we're talking about next week's topic this
Yes,
week.
you're-
So let's
yes.
wrap this up. I'm taking over hosting duties. We're
Oh,
done.
Somebody's leaving. Somebody's opened the door and left.
All right, bye everybody.
But I was in Toronto a few years ago. I was making a movie called The Boondock Saints, and the nominees are. And I got 5 days off in the middle of it, which isn't really unusual. And I'm very much a creature of habit. I do the same thing but most days.
And in every town I play in the world, I have a walk that I do. The same walk. I have one in London, but I'm not telling you what it is because you'll follow me. You want a selfie. Actually, I don't mind doing selfies, but please, if you ever meet me and you want a selfie, have your stuff ready. Don't make me stand there as you get through your bag looking for your camera. Because it looks as if I've asked you to do it, you know.